going on, nation? Keith Bilous, Manuel, and coming up, Jonathan
Twombly.
It's Jonathan Twombly joining us here today for some family wealth wisdom live in the lab. Two dads in a lab trying to be, I guess, we're going to be 6% better today.
Oh, hey, well, why stop at 6?
I'm not the finance guy. That's why I brought Jonathan on today, so he could talk to us about family investing, multifamily investing, family legacy money, and so forth. Jonathan, we met over the last couple of weeks, and I said, hey, why don't you come sit down with Di and I? We're a couple dads sitting here in the lab trying to be better at life. And I said, why don't you come sit with us? So Jonathan, where are you joining us today from? And it's a pleasure to have you here today, my friend.
Yeah, good to be here. I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, the new Manhattan of New York City.
The new Manhattan. That's 20 years old news, but yeah, it's the place to be in New York now. Nobody even goes to Manhattan anymore.
So Jonathan, you are a what?
Yeah, so I am a real estate investor and a coach. And what I do basically on the real estate investment side is pool a bunch of investors' money together, go buy a property, run it for 5 or so years, and then sell it. And on the coaching side, I teach people how to do that. If they don't want to invest with me or they want to go out and develop this kind of business on their own, I teach them how they can do it.
No kidding. So what came first? The real estate side, and then you learned how to do it, got social proof, and then went and taught people how to do it?
Yeah, basically. I started out in 2011 doing investments in apartment buildings. And there were a lot of people out there coaching, had a very kind of like late night TV sort of scummy aspect to it. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. Let's introduce some real education into the space rather than this kind of get rich quick stuff. So that's why I launched the coaching side of the business.
I'm a little concerned because I create late night TV stuff. So I think our guest,
it's kind of funny. You're talking late night TV. I remember I had a company for 17 years selling fitness equipment. It still exists, but I exited out of that business. But I remember a lot of the goods that we sold. Well, actually, we wouldn't carry them, but we'd get so many people coming in and saying, "Hey, I saw this product on TV." You remember the shake weight? The Flex, right? Like all these products. So it's amazing the influence that late night TV has. But
well, listen, I bought a bunch of that stuff off late night TV myself, so I can only push this so far. I was totally reeled in. So
I think you helped support probably Di's early retirement for a while there.
Right? Dude, it was hilarious. Bowflex, when we started carrying those in the stores, we were one of the first retailers that they allowed to actually retail the product on the floor. And I just remember the excitement because it was distributed out of Winnipeg, actually.
Yes, it was. Exactly.
That's where Nautilus Canada was based, Bowflex Canada. And I remember we negotiated a couple containers, and it was the craziest thing, man. I'd have people come in, I'd be like, hey, listen, there's another item over here that's actually $200 less. It's going to give you a way better workout and last a lot longer.
Yeah.
That's okay. I want the Bowflex. Like just TV, man. It's amazing what that kind of marketing does. And actually, on that note, Jonathan, like in the real estate space, because it is such a competitive landscape, and there's so many differing opinions about ways that you can do this. What has it been like for you since you've been in since 2011? Obviously, coming in to the investment on the real estate after that blip at the late 2008, 2009. I imagine that there's a lot of fall off based on that, people that were in the space that maybe got out of the space. And so I'm just curious, what was that journey like for you starting at 2011, coming out of that big, and I hate to use the term crash, but it was definitely a huge adjustment North American wide. And I'm just curious, what's your experience been like?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a crash for sure. And coming in at that time, it was both really hard and also a great time to get in because it was hard because there was just a lot of mistrust in the market. It was funny. I started out investing in South Carolina, and we got when I started looking down there, I'd see all these deals, and you'd look through like the chain of title and the previous sellers, and there was like this one group that every single property I saw, there was this one group that had owned this property, and they had all basically the next sale, every single one of them was zero, meaning they'd all been foreclosed on. And I remember when I got my first property under contract, I went to one of the local banks in South Carolina and I said, would you guys finance this? And they said, no, because you're from out of state. And apparently this other group had been from out of state, and they just handed they just went on this buying spree at the top of the market, handed everything back to the banks. So the banks were like, if you buy a condo down here and have an address, maybe we'll lend to you. But it was that that sort of
Really?
situation. Yeah, it was.
How did you circumvent that then? What do you have to do to circumvent a situation like that? Because obviously that's, and I can appreciate the banks where the situation they found themselves at times, you
I
know?
mean, getting around that, fortunately, I had a partner who was pretty
Mm,
deep pocketed and we went through
yeah,
his banking relationships. At first, I didn't intend to lean on that, but ultimately,
yeah.
you got to do what you got to do. So we went on the first one through his banking relationships. And then once you get one done, then it becomes a whole lot
Right.
easier.
You can leverage those again and again as
Yeah.
well, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Are your kids into it?
So what I've started doing the last couple of years is buying hotels.
Oh,
And
okay.
Oh,
Wow.
the kids
Monopoly today, Di. It's Monopoly on the show.
Actually, Jonathan, which is your piece in Monopoly? What piece do you use?
Yeah, exactly. It's the hotels now, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, so this is a great thing about real estate. So with what I do, you can essentially take you find your hotel and it's over there like on Baltic when you buy it,
Yes.
Yep.
and you get to move it all the way over until St. James Place or some better area. Maybe not all the way to Boardwalk, but you can definitely
Yeah,
move
right.
it halfway around the board. So that's what I do now. I find these hotels that are in great locations, but just really need a lot of TLC.
Hmm.
And we bring them back to life. So when you ask about my kids, like they think this is the coolest thing in the world, right? So when the kids are like at school telling their friends, what does your father do? And they're like, oh, he owns hotels. Like they've told me that that's like they really get excited to be able to tell the other
Yeah.
kids that's what I do.
It's like you're like Home Alone.
What is that? I don't
Well,
get
wasn't there a hotel? Isn't there a reference in
And
one
it
of
was
the
number two. And number two, right?
Yeah, the kid.
Oh yeah. He stayed in the hotel. Yeah, I stayed in the plaza, right? That's a little different from what I'm doing, but
Oh, you're not buying the Plaza hotels, Jonathan
not
Twombly?
not yet. Not
Oh,
yet. Maybe
Not
someday.
yet. I like that. I like that operative word.
how old are the kids, Jonathan?
So they're 15 and 11.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Do you so when you have they seen dad go through the ups and downs of business and the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship and you share with Di and I that journey of your kids growing up watching dad do this?
Yeah, it's funny. They're definitely exposed to the ups and downs of it, right? We've sheltered them from it a bit, especially when they were younger.
Yeah.
When there's really no reason to talk about. I don't know what your channel is. Dad's business is in the crapper. Like you can't really like, when your kids are little, you can't really, anyway, it wouldn't mean anything to them. But as they've gotten older, we've been more open about like the ups and downs, like good year, bad year. And the funny thing is since they grew up this way, this is just their mindset, right? They just think neither one of them will say, oh, I want to grow up and get a job at a big company. They don't ever talk about, I want to go work for such and such a place. They're definitely thinking outside the box there. It's either like music or it's they want to write or they want to do what I do or just have a business of some kind, but they've never once said, oh, I want to go work for Apple or whatever the choices could be. So it's interesting. It definitely the propaganda has worked on them.
The propaganda has worked, and your encouragement to probably doing their own thing is probably rubbed off along the way, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
do you think that you continue building your empire, if I may use those words? Does it seem natural that they step into it?
I don't know. I have never really said one way or the other about because I really don't. I don't want to put any kind of expectations on them or like inadvertently guide them away from whatever their path is.
Right.
So I've always, I don't want to inadvertently make them think that I'm expecting them to follow me into the business. If they at some point decide that's what they want to do, I'd be really happy. But I don't ever want them to feel that pressure because I know that parents, and I certainly was like the recipient of this, where whether or not parents were trying to push you in a certain direction, they can set up an expectation that makes you think that your parents want you to go in that direction, and it can mess with a kid a lot. So I've tried really consciously to just show them like this is fun, but like you do your own thing, and whatever that is, I'll support you.
Yeah, Di and I have talked about this in the past about encouraging children, encouraging our kids. I got 3 kids. Di's got a couple, and we've spoken in the past. But how much do you encourage? How much do you nudge along, and how much do you allow them to chart their own path? Frankly,
Yeah, well, I guess I err on the side of them charting their own path.
yes,
Right? Because like I said, I was heavily steered by my parents, and that was bad. So who knows if I've gone too far in the other direction, but I really don't push them on anything. I just try to guide them. Like for instance, kids have their struggles with school. And they're usually, it's not so much about the academics, but it's about having to go to school and the environment of school and like the kind of like the factory like aspect of schools. And I tell them frankly, like, guys, like you're stuck in this like 19th century institution that hasn't changed much. And this is not where the world is. But they came to that conclusion already before I talked to them about it. But what I would tell them is, hey, look, you just have to understand the game you're playing, why you're playing it, why it's important to create options for yourself. Like, don't do school in such a way that like you shrink your options. Do school in such a way that you increase your options. And just think about it that way, because it's just not, it's not that important in the long run, but it's also important. I try to just, I guess I'm always trying to increase their optionality when I talk with them, just and just tell them, don't get hung up on these things, but just use them to design your own life.
It's good insights though. And it's, yeah, the education piece. I can tell there's an underlying opinion there, Jonathan, and I would think that it's a fairly common opinion nowadays. I think there's obviously Canada, the US, us being up north of the border, the education system, there's really not a huge amount of difference. We both recognize, just like our medical systems, they might say, we get free medical again. Hell no. Yeah, if you want to wait for 18 months to get something critical, or you'd be like a guy that has to wait 48 hours to be told he's had a stroke. To me, I'm like, I'd rather pay to know now. But regardless, where I'm going with this is with this sort of view of education or formal education in the form that it is now, what do you find that you do with your kids to support that non-school or infrastructure or institutional education? Are there certain things that you try to encourage your kids to explore, or you model for them? I'm curious about recognizing. It's one thing to say that, yeah, our education system's got some challenges, but I'd be really curious to know, what is there something that you do in the home that supports them learning and growing in other ways? And I'm sure there are, and I just love to hear what those are.
We encourage them in the other things that they want to pursue, which is in both of their cases music. We never pushed them into music lessons. It was never something like, oh, you got to go study the piano. Like it's funny. So I didn't do this intentionally. Like I told my older daughter, one of the things I wish I'd done when I was younger was voice lessons. I always liked to sing. I wish I'd had voice lessons. My mom forced me to take piano lessons. Didn't like it. I wish she'd just said, take voice lessons. Ironically, my mom had studied voice when she was young. She never suggested it to me, but I just suggested it to my older daughter, and she was like, oh, I want to do that. So, okay, so we'll find you a teacher. And then because she was doing it, then her sister wanted to do it too. Now they're both really into it. Now my older one's picked up guitar, right? The younger one like writes all the time. I mean, she comes home from school and she pops open the laptop and she's just writing all day long. So we like really encourage them to do that, and we make it clear to them that we get that school is stressful, and that we want to make sure that they don't take it so seriously that it stresses them out. So like we let them, if they're just like not feeling it, like we're like, okay, you can take a day off, right? Mental health day, you need it, take it. And the funny thing about that is that since we started doing that, then they've been asking to stay home a lot less. I think just knowing that they have that option just takes some of the pressure off. We really don't push them. We allow them to develop like their own pride in what they're doing. So if they want to do well in school because it makes them feel good, then that's why we want them to do well in school, because of that, not because like we put pressure on them to do it. So
Jonathan Twombly, one of the goals that Keith and I have with our show is to offer actionable advice for our audience. And I'm going to wrap up this episode with us here with getting you to bring this to a T.
Oh, did you freeze there?
Empowering of your children to.
You got to ask that question again.
Yeah, you got to ask Keith to pause for a second. I thought it was a dramatic pause, but then it was like an awkward pause, right? Yeah. So I was like, oh no, he's frozen. He's frozen.
I was saying, Jonathan, that you guys clearly have set the stage for empowering your kids to make decisions, right? I know that Di and I really focus on giving our audience this actionable advice, something to create awareness in your head. You also said that what was bad, you growing up, some of the ways your parents parented you. You clearly have made it a mission, you and your wife, to give your kids wings, haven't you? And that to me is the actionable advice that I think I'd like you to maybe hang on that and close out this episode of how do we give our kids wings, Jonathan? How do you have that courage to just give them wings and encourage them to get feedback, if they're having a mental health day? And how did you and your wife just really go down that path and give them the gift of wings?
That's a good question. I just think you just have to be like as open-minded as possible.
It's
And
scary though.
yeah, it's scary. And there have definitely been times when I felt like, is this the right approach? Because there were definitely times when they started slacking off or they started not wanting to go to school or things like that. And I would often think, oh, maybe now I got to bring down the hammer. And my wife would always be like, don't do that. Just take it easy. And then so like I just relaxed and then I let them right the ship themselves. And I think that the reason that it worked is because we've always made it clear to them that we would always support them and that whenever they were struggling with something, they could always come to us. So I think we drove that message home all the time. Like, you can always talk to us. You can always talk to us. You can always talk to us. Whatever's bothering you, it doesn't matter what it is. We won't judge you. So just bring it to us. And I think that just creating that environment of like, it's all okay. And not like it's all okay, like you can go and screw around and do illegal stuff. Like, not that okay, but it's all okay. Like, we will support you. Whatever you're struggling with is okay. Doesn't matter what it is. I think, I don't know, I guess they just got the mental space that enabled them to start figuring it out. It's like figuring it out in a safe environment, I guess I want to say. Like, they knew that they had room to experiment because at the end of the day, mom and dad were always going to be there for them so that they could then figure it out with less risk. I don't know. Maybe that's.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So Jonathan Twombly, why don't we come back for episode 2? You gave us some good things to hang on here, which is really empowering our kids with wings. To me, this episode really is about empowering our kids, giving them the gift of wings. Let's come back for the next episode and talk about empowering our kids with family wealth. You're dealing with a lot of human beings, helping them build their wealth. You've got a couple of children on their own. Let's pivot our discussion to family wealth, building a legacy of family wealth in the next episode with 2 dads in a lab trying to be 2% better. Does that work for you, Jonathan?
Sure.
Awesome. So now the live audience is listening right now. We are pausing